Hello, I'm Jana, and welcome back to the Crafty Corner. Today, we're going to be deep diving into Tim Holtz Christmas Ideology. This is my absolute favorite crafty time of the year, so we're going to be having some fun and looking at a variety of ways to alter ideology holiday components. If you'd like to see which materials we're going to be using here today, go ahead and pause here. Just a small note, this is going to be a two-part video, so welcome to part one. Now, let's head over to the Crafty Corner. So we're going to be working on altering lots of ideology today. And our first alteration is going to be centered around some of the beautiful ideology backdrops. Now, these are beautiful in and of themselves, but there is so much more that we can do to these to make them even more unique. This is also a really good time for me to pull in the brand new toy that I just got. I have currently now got the new Tim Holtz tonic cutter in the house. And this is the slide cutter. That just glides and it is gorgeous. So, if I was doing larger paper, it would not be much of a problem. There is a little ruler that will pop out on the side and give me extra measurements top and bottom and support for a larger paper. But today we're using the ideology backdrop, so we do not need to extend those extra arms. Okay, well, let's go ahead and set this down, and we're going to be cutting to our regular card length of 5.5 by 4.25. So I'll start with 4.25, and we'll trim this down. Ooh, that slices really nicely. Okay, and let's turn it this way. Here we are for 5.5. And we'll slide that. That feels really, really nice. That glides. Very interesting. Definitely like it. Okay, so here is the panel that we're going to be using. And we'll just pop this off to the side and jump into our first Christmas ideology alteration. Our first alteration is going to be pretty simple, and we are going to be pulling in some Distress Texture Paste Sparkle, and we're going to give a little bit of holiday shimmer to this background. So definitely you could apply this with a paintbrush or even a foam sponge, but I'm just going to go right in and scoop a bit of this out and put it onto my surface, and then I'm just going to spread it around with a finger. I find this method to be just a little bit faster, and I think it allows me to feel if I'm getting an even distribution of glitter on my substrate. So it's definitely going to be going on a little bit opaque, but when it dries, it's going to be clear with a little bit of shine and definitely a bit of sparkle. So I'm just going to rub that right on here. Good. Almost covered. If we have a little bit left over, not a problem, because I can always put that on some other pieces of ephemera that we're going to be altering today. Okay, that looks pretty good. Definitely got a little bit left over, so I'm just going to kind of scoop that up with my finger and apply that to another piece of ephemera. Alright, let's try to get that. Kind of want to make sure this is smooth. I don't really want to have any lumps, but I can just stick that off to the side and I'll come back to that and add that to some other pieces. Right now I just want to kind of smooth this out, which is why I'm doing a bit of a circular motion. Okay, good. So definitely happy with this. We'll set this off to the side to dry. Now my best estimate on dry time is going to be somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes. It's a pretty thin coat, but again, lower Quebec, humidity, and all that fun. So setting that aside. And let's see here. I have got a whole bunch of ephemera pieces that we're going to be altering today with a variety of methods. Oh, let's see here. Ooh, you know what? I'd like to sparkle those poinsettias. Just gonna take a little of that and spread that right on. Okay, that should be nice and sparkly. And we'll go ahead and set this piece aside as well. And we're going to do just a little bit of quick cleanup on the mat and my fingers, because now just a little bit glittery. So for the mat, nothing special, just a bit of water and wiping it down with a towel. And putting our press and seal back in place to make sure that our medium won't dry out. Okay. Good. Now, a little bit more. Wipe that up. We're going to move on to distressing. So, when we have ephemera, there are multiple ways to distress. Now, the two that I think of most when we talk about distressing would be adding ink to the edges, just going in with a little bit of vintage photo and darkening up the edges of a piece. That would be the first and most obvious distress method, but we could go old school and bring in a paper distresser. If we run that along the edge, we can chew up the edge, and that is another way to distress our paper and get a vintage feel. This, by the way, is another Tim Holtz tool, and this one is by Tonic. So we're just going to let that chew up the edges of the paper. Since we chewed up the edges of the paper, we expose some of that white area underneath, so we can go back in with our ink dabber and run that across the edge to darken it up. Now we have a distressed and an ink distressed piece of ephemera. Now, what if we want to add gold to things? We have got a few different methods if we want to add some highlights of metallic. So right here I've got some more ephemera. I'm just going to divide this into 3 categories. 1, we've got the option of foiling. 2, we could add some Foundry Wax. 3, we could do a little bit of gold embossing powder. And 4, we could even add a little bit of distress paint. So we're going to take a look at all of these options and see what happens when we try them out. So I'm just kind of splitting my ephemera between the 4 groupings, and we will see what we get. Okay. So the first thing we will try some of the distress paint. And let's just go ahead and set the rest of these off to the side, and we'll come back to them in a moment or two. So distress paint is the easiest way to add a little bit of shine. All we really need is a paintbrush and, of course, the distress paint. For the distress paint, I am using tarnished brass. So we'll give that a good shake and put a little bit down onto the mat. Now in this case, we've got these lovely bells, and why not make those bells more metallic? So, just going to get some paint. I'm going to very carefully just see if I can't paint these in a bit and get that gold feel. I'm not painting the whole thing, just a little bit. Okay. Let's see about these over here. Not bad. And it just takes a little bit to add that metallic touch. Okay, I'm going to set this piece off to dry. And let's do one more. This one we're just going to edge the border for a little bit of gold accent. Just like that, just painting it on. And we'll turn. Good. It is so nice that we've got multiple options when we want to get different effects on ephemera. And the hard thing is remembering all of the choices once you get all of the goodies out of the box to play with. Okay, so we've got a little bit of gold edging on this. We'll set that one off to dry as well. Okay, and I'm just going to do a quick clean on the paint that I've put down. A little bit more water. Good. Next, let's bring in the embossing powder. This would be the Ranger Gold embossing powder. It's very, very pretty. And we'll put down some paper to catch the powder in. And let's see here. I think I want an embossing pen so I can do the edges of these pieces. Oh, let's see. I think we'll do these two. Okay. So here I just want to add a little bit of gold edge around these pieces of ephemera. I'm just taking the embossing distress pen and inking the edges, and that's going to give a spot for the embossing powder to stick to. Okay, that looks good. So let's go ahead and sprinkle the powder on and see how we did. Yep, we've definitely got powder on there. That's good. A little bit more. Tap off the extra. All right, let's see how we're doing. Okay, that looks like plenty of embossing powder. So I'm going to set this aside for a moment and we're going to ink up our other piece and see how that goes. So on this piece, I want to do some dots instead of an edging. So I'm just taking this pen and putting down a sprinkling of dots. So on this one, I'm just going to put down a sprinkling of dots. I want to get a different effect this time. Okay, let's see how we did. Since I've already got some embossing powder on here, I'm just going to take that and kind of sift that around. Okay, pretty good. We've got some nice dots on here. Okay, I'm just going to put this right back into the jar. And we'll be back in a moment after we have embossed our two pieces. Here are the finished embossed pieces. Definitely liking the one with the dots. That came out really good. And here's our border. Pretty good too. All right, I'll set those aside. Now let's take a look at Foundry Wax. So Foundry Wax, another method of adding some metallic to ephemera. So with Foundry Wax, we want to take it and make sure that we give it a really good shake. We want to hear the mixing ball in there to make sure that things are getting incorporated. Sounds pretty good. All right, let's put that right down on the mat. That should be enough. And I'm just going to grab a paintbrush and we're going to apply that right to our ephemera. So I'm just taking the paintbrush and I'm just quickly going around the edges. Just trying to get a bit of a gold border. Yeah, looks like it got a little gloopy here. That's okay. It'll melt out. So I'm just taking a paintbrush and just continuing to dab around the edges. Okay, good. That'd be piece number one. Let's go for the small holiday one. Just going to keep going around the edge. Now, the thing with Foundry Wax is that you have to work pretty quickly because it does start to dry out pretty quickly. Open time isn't overly long. I mean, you don't have like seconds to work. You've got maybe a minute or two but you still need to work pretty quickly or the medium is going to start to dry up on your mat. Okay, keep going around the edges of this piece. So far it's looking pretty good. And I do think I'm going to need to add a little bit more of the Foundry Wax so I can complete that edge. Good. Now clean up on Foundry Wax, a little bit of hand sanitizer, and this will wipe off quite nicely from the mat. And if you need a little bit more time and the Foundry Wax is starting to dry out, it is possible to extend the Foundry Wax just a little bit with a dash of rubbing alcohol. That will liquefy it for a little bit, but it will still dry quickly. Okay, here are our 3 altered pieces. Let's go ahead and emboss these. Okay, here are the 3 finished pieces of ephemera. Now we're going to go ahead and kick things on fast forward while we heat up the Foundry Wax with the Sizzix embossing heat gun. Here are the results from heating up the Foundry Wax. We now have a beautiful golden gilded edge on all of these pieces. And that just, I love that. It adds a holiday dimension to our ephemera. Okay, and the final method that we could use to add some shine to our ephemera would be using a bit of Deco Foil. Now, this is very interesting, and we can actually add the Deco Foil using a stamp. Now, over here on Stamp Set Jolly Holiday CMS 474, we've got these beautiful twinkle stars, and I think those are going to be just the right thing to add a bit of sparkle to these 2 pieces of ephemera. So I'm just going to put that right on here, and we're going to need to pull in an older piece of craft mat because I'm going to be putting this right on the craft mat, and then we're going to use a brayer to apply the Mink ink by Heidi Swap onto our stamp, which will then allow us to add Deco Foil. Okay, so let's set the stamp off to the side for a moment while we get our inking set up. So for Mink ink, we're going to be using a brayer. This is one of the Tim Holtz brayers, and it's got a pretty reasonable firmness to it. And I have a piece of scrap plastic. We do not want to get the ink onto the mat. So we're going to take some Mink ink, and I'm going to carefully drip a little bit onto our plastic, just 4 drops. We really shouldn't need a whole lot. We're just going to be doing a little bit of stamping today. And I'm going to put our design image right here. And I've got the stamp ready to go. So I'm just going to take the brayer and we're going to move that back and forth. And I just want to make sure that I've got good even coverage. When you hear it starting to go a little bit tacky, you know that the consistency is just right. Now we're going to very carefully brayer over our stamped image. So we want to make sure that there's a good covering of the black ink on here. Okay, good. And we're going to just take this and stamp it down. Now we don't want to hold it on here too long or it will get stuck. You can hear it make a very noticeable clicking sound when it peels off. So I'm just inking the stamp one more time. And I'm going to stamp right here. Okay. And right away you can see where the black spots are. Those are the stars. And we're just going to give this a little bit of time and it's going to dry. Now I think I've got enough ink that I can do one more stamping. So again, we're going to take the brayer, run that right over the stamp. That's good. And stamp it down. I just want the stars like right here. Yep, we got it. Ooh, I might even be able to do the corners. I kind of want to do the corners. Not sure I have enough ink, but we can try. So just moving that, sticking that there. Yep, that worked. And let me see if I can't get this side. Yes, I did. Okay, so we're going to let that ink dry, and while it dries, let's take a look at what cleanup looks like. So the brayer, I need to just keep rolling it until the black stuff comes off. You can hear the sound that it makes. It's very crinkly as it rolls across the paper. That means I've still got ink on it. There we go, now it's starting to come off. So as you can see, there's a little bit left, but the majority of the ink is pretty much gone, which is just what we want. Okay, and now we have a nice clean brayer. So I'll put that away. And this, I'm not going to keep that. I can get more plastic the next time I want to do this technique. Now, for cleaning the stamp, we are going to need some archival ink cleaner. And that's pretty much the only way that ink is going to be coming off the stamp. So, I use the archival ink cleaner by Ranger. I'm just going to dab that on. And I'll grab a piece of paper towel. And we'll be able to clean that stamp right off. If the ink doesn't come right off, we can always go back in with more archival cleaner. Yep, I'm gonna need round 2. That's okay. In general, this is really the only time that I do use the archival ink cleaner. Everything else pretty much just comes right off with water, but mink ink, we don't want it to interfere with future stampings, so that's why we're giving the stamp a very good clean right now. Okay, that looks good. Now I do want to give it a little blast of water just to get the cleaner off. Okay, and the stamp looking good as new. So let's turn our attention right back to the pieces of ephemera that we have stamped. Now we're going to be taking some Deco Foil and adding that across the top of these two pieces. So just measuring roughly, I'm going to just place that right here. We'll take that other piece. Ooh, this is perfect. We'll place that there. Now I'll just grab some scissors and trim this down a bit. Okay. After we have this all nicely trimmed, we are going to be running this through the ink machine. Now you could use a laminator, but the problem is laminators only heat to one temperature. The mini mink has 5 different levels of heat. So I like using a mini mink for foiling. And here's the mini mink. I have already preheated this. As you can see, we've got a multiple variety of settings, and this would be our on button. It's preheated, the light is green, that means we're good to go. So now I just need to get a carrier sheet and we can run our pieces through and see the shine and sparkle. Here is our carrier sheet, and this comes with the mink. So I'm just going to take my 2 pieces of ephemera with the foil and place them in the carrier sheet, making a sandwich. Now, just a little side note, when we foil, we take our substrate and we place it down onto the not so pretty side of the foil. We always want the foil to be face up on top of our elements. Alright, so now I'm just going to feed this through the machine and we'll let the mink work its magic. This side, it's been a while. There we go. And I'm just giving that a little support on the back and letting it feed through. Now, if we don't get a clean transfer on round 1, not a big deal. We can always put the foil back on and send it back through the machine if we need to. Ooh, looks like I was a little crooked feeding this in. Whoops. I might have to feed this through a second time because things got a little bunchy. Yeah, I am going to send that through a second time. There we go. Just feeding that through a second time. It can't hurt. That looks better. So the mink is pretty quick, which I really like, and it's wonderful having things preheat to a temperature of your choosing. And you just switch the heat temperature level by pushing the gold button. Okay, that looks better. And now the fun part, the reveal. So, just open that up, take our pieces out, and let's see how we did. Start with the smaller one. Ooh, look at that shine. Yeah. Oh, I haven't done mink ink in so long. I've got to remember this. I love that shine with the Deco Foil, and it gives a little more of a vintagey vibe with the little snowflakes. And I really like this particular Deco Foil. This is the amber watercolor. That's what it is. The label just isn't where I normally look for one. Okay, let's see how that second piece came out. Ooh. Just as pretty. Look at that shine. So we have got 4 different ways to add shine and sparkle to our projects. That is pretty cool. Let's go ahead and take a look at all of the different things that we've added some shine to so far. Okay, let's quickly recap on all of the things we've added a touch of gold to so far today. So first we did some vintage sparkle on top of an Idea-ology background. We tried that out over some Idea-ology ephemera. And we also did a bit of embossing. We added a bit of shine with some distress paint. This is definitely more subtle, but it's a very vintage metallic. We did a little bit of distressing just for some fun, and we played with some Foundry Wax. The Foundry Wax is really great. It's nice and drippy, and it has a textural element as well. Then, for our final way to add some shine with gold, we used some Deco Foil and mink ink paired with a Stampers Anonymous stamp from Jolly Holiday. So, this is just the beginning of what you can do to alter ephemera. Now, we're going to dive into all things glitter. We're going to be altering with Distress Glitter next. For adding glitter, my favorite adhesive is Glossy Accents. So, let's go ahead and we're going to take this thick board embellishment and we're going to add some glossy accents to it just right out of the bottle. So I'm just taking the glossy accents and I'm just scribbling it right onto this beautiful peppermint cane striped piece. So once we have a good layer of glossy accents on here, we will then be able to add the distress glitter. Okay, that is looking really good, and that's got some beautiful gloss on it. We should now be able to cover this in glitter. So again, pulling in some scrap paper and glitter, and I am so happy that we have got this giant bottle of glitter, 7.75 ounces, and that vintage label, too good. So let's go ahead and sprinkle this on. Ooh, that looks great. Super sparkly. Okay, let's go ahead and set this aside. Next, we're going to add some glitter to some smaller pieces. We've got some really fun candy cane pieces, and we're going to be glittering these, and we're also going to be glittering these chipboard stars. So again, I'm just going to be taking some glossy accents, and we're going to put that right on to our pieces. Now for the glossy accents, I am going to be putting that down on a piece of scrap plastic. That way I won't get any of that onto the media mat. So just taking some scrap plastic, and I'm going to put a little bit on here. For smaller pieces, I prefer to apply the glossy accents directly with my fingers. Also off to the side, I do have some squeezers that will help me easily pick up these smaller pieces. Okay, so putting some glossy accents right here, and moving the bottle off to the side. Now, if you didn't want to use your fingers, you definitely could use a paintbrush, but it would have to be a sacrificial paintbrush because this does dry pretty quickly. All right, just putting that in there. Next. And I'm just going to try and make this as quick as possible so that I don't lose too much of the glossy accents. Okay. So we're just going to keep smearing this on and dunking that right into the glitter. Okay, and that started to dry on my fingers, so I'm just quickly wiping that off. Now I'm going to grab the squeezers, and I'm going to carefully take these and set them to the side. See, nice and sparkly. So I'm going to glitter the rest of these pieces, just smushing on the glossy accents with my fingers and dipping it right into the glitter. Let's go ahead and put this part on fast forward. While our glittery stars and candy pieces dry, we're going to pull in a clear transparency. This is from this year's Christmas baseboard frames, and we're going to be adding some snow to this. And I've got a stencil off to the side. This is one of my favorites. This is THS 021, and this just has the most wonderful snowy look to it. So I am planning on using this for a department store window at some point. So I want to do some heavy snowfall, kind of like as if it were coming around the edges on a windowsill. And to do that, of course, we need some Distress Grit Paste Snowfall. So we're just going to take some of that, and we're going to press that through a stencil. And that should give us a wonderful snowy look. and lift. Yep, that looks great. So I do want to do the same thing over here. And we're just going to press that through, and I'm going to try not to squish the other pattern. There we go. Lift that off. Okay. I think that's giving me the snowy look that I want. Now, right away, I've got to toss this in some water off to the side to make sure that my stencil doesn't become permanently textured. Okay. And of course, we're just going to close this back up, and we will check back in on this later after our texture paste has had a chance to dry. But in the meantime, take a look at that. That is just so snowy and wonderful. Absolutely love the idea of pairing these things together. Here is a quick look at the elements that we have added some sparkle to. I just love that distressed glitter. And here is the dried snowfall paste. So we're gonna pause things here, and I will see you in part 2. Until later, happy crafting.